Hey guys, today I want to share with you some full sun perennials that you should consider putting into your garden. Hi, I'm Heidi with Broadmeadow Farms, and today we're going to go over some really popular full sun perennials that will work really good in your Zone 3 Alberta garden. I've lived in Alberta my entire life, so all of my experience in gardening happens to be primarily in full sun gardens. If you haven't gardened in Alberta before, you might be thinking that we have too harsh of a climate and that we really can't grow anything here, but you'd be surprised. We've got lots of perennials that are going to give you full sun, full shade, but today we're going to talk about full sun. I have a huge passion for perennials. There's just something about being able to purchase a plant once and then knowing that year after year it's going to continue to come up in your garden. Gardening does not need to be complicated. Maybe pick your top 4 to 6 plants out of this list and try putting them in your garden. Once you've established them and know that you can take care of your garden really well, then you can branch out to some more of these in the future. The number one plant I think you need to have in your garden is Daylily. Thrive in full sun and will even do well in partial shade. What you'll notice though when you use them in partial shade is that the blooms will be delayed later than those that are in the full sun. Even after they've finished blooming, they still have beautiful foliage that gives nice shape and texture to your perennial border. Next one I would recommend is Veronica. It's one of those few perennials that actually comes into a blue color. People are always looking for blue, so definitely take a look into your garden center and see if you can find Veronica. One of the perennials that is really nice to have in the back of the border is a really tall plant, and Delphinium is one of those. There's multiple different types of varieties. The Pacific Giants is probably one of the favorites, and it comes in shades of purple and light blue and mauve and pink and white. Sometimes they have dark centers, and they're often called a dark bee. So when you're looking at your Delphiniums, consider the fact that they are going to be quite a tall plant. Sometimes they can be over 5 feet. So I'm about 5'2", so just think about that in your garden. If you've got a place that can stand something really tall, by all means put them in the back of your border. Peonies also, because they are so tall, need to be in a more of a wind protected area. So also keep that in mind. Some people like to put tomato cages in the plant as they first start to grow so that you can have a little bit more support for them. Next up we have poppies. Now there's 2 different types of poppies that you can grow. There's the oriental poppies. Those are the bright orange ones that you see often. And as well there's the Icelandic. The Icelandic is a much shorter poppy and they're really petite and they're really nice to have near the front of your border. Here's a little tip when you're growing the ornamental poppies. Once they're finished blooming, cut them right back down to the ground and let them regrow from the ground up, because that way they're not looking quite so messy in your garden. If your season prolongs and is really good, you might get a second flush of blooms late in the summer. Scabiosa is another one that can come in a bit of a pale blue color. It's also one that you want to consider if you're looking to have that blue in your garden. Perennial gardens is not necessarily always about the show and the color. Sometimes you want to have texture and neutral things in the garden that just kind of plays a background or a backdrop to some of the showcase ones that are at the front. And one of those is Silverking sage. I actually talked about it in my earlier video, and I'll link that up above, about how I like to use it in cut flowers. Everyone knows peonies. Peonies is one of those perennials that requires a little bit of an investment. So you're going to put them in the ground and don't expect a bloom for at least till about the second season. They also do not like to be disturbed. So these are not a plant that you're going to plant in your garden now and decide in the fall, oh, I don't like this place. I'm going to move it to the next spot and move it and move it. Peonies like to set roots. They don't like to be disturbed and they get really grumpy if you keep moving them. So pick a spot that a peony works and let it stay there. Oftentimes you'll find these in old established gardens that can be well over 40 to 60 years old. Solidago is another really nice one to have in your garden, especially if you're into cut flowers and wanting bouquets on your table. Do you have a full sun but really hot, dry area? Then you want to consider Russian sage. It's also a really nice plant that fills in beautifully. And every garden should have at least multiple different colors of lilies. If scent of lily is a bit of a problem for you, make sure you stay to more of the Asiatic lilies rather than the oriental lilies. The oriental kind of have a bit of a strong smell that can certainly overpower some people. So we talked a little bit about the Silverking sage that was a bit taller. Then you want to think about snow and summer. It's a mounding perennial and it's really nice at the front of your bed. Another cute little one is called Sea Thrift or Armeria, and that one's really nice to have kind of mixed in with a rock garden or near the front of your bed because it's going to give you some hot pink pops of color in your garden. Sweet William or Pinks is another one that's going to give you some really nice pops of color in your flower beds. Sweet William can be a bit of a short-lived perennial, so don't be surprised if after a couple years the center dies out and maybe you don't have as big of a plot as you did before. When it comes to early flowering spring perennials, one of the ones you want to put in your garden is Snowdrop Anemone. And it is one that will also mound out a little bit, but it is beautiful in the spring as it shoots its little white flowers up, and it's really great to fill in spaces. Monkshood is another one of those back of the border plants that is beautiful. It has a purple flower. Some of them are purple and white, but they are beautiful for the back of the garden. Just don't let small children pick them or put them in their mouths because they are considered poisonous. Hens and chicks and other stone crops or sedums work really well also in the garden. Just make sure that when you purchase them that you're checking that label to make sure that they are considered a zone 3 and will work in our garden. Some of the ones that work well here are Autumn Joy sedum, Dragon's Blood. There are some hens and chicks that do work well outside as well. There are 2 types of iris that I would recommend that you put in your garden. The first is the German bearded iris, and that's the one that you might have seen in your grandma's garden. It's got quite a large head, and the other one is the Siberian iris. It's a lot more dainty. It's got quite slender leaves. Both are beautiful in the garden. If you're into rock gardens and you have a pathway, something to really think about putting in between those rocks of your path is thyme. Thyme can take a little bit of foot traffic, and when you do step on it, it does release that little musky smell, and it's beautiful again in the garden. The next one I want to recommend, but I hesitate to recommend because it has a tendency to reseed itself throughout your garden, but it's still a beautiful plant, and that is yarrow. Yarrow is amazing. It blooms for a really long period in your garden. It holds up great in cut flower bouquets. So I just keep in mind that every spring you're going to have to pull out some of the new baby plants, and you might find them all over your garden. So one of the best ways to prevent that is to actually, when it finishes blooming, cut off those flower heads before they set seed. Another tip I have when it comes to planting your perennial garden is to choose varieties of perennials that have different bloom times. And what I mean by that is some plants bloom early spring, some midsummer, and some late summer. That way, if you have a little bit of everything in your garden, you always have some color and never have something that's empty. That's just a taste of some of the beautiful perennials that you can put into your garden in full sun. In the coming weeks, we'll talk a little bit about what you can put into your shade garden. I've grown many of these plants in my gardens, and I'm always on the hunt for another favorite. What's your favorite perennial? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to like and share this video. When you share my videos, it helps others find them, and then I can help and answer their questions as well. Thanks for gardening today. See you next week.